Hi, Minnesota. This is Christie Thompson with Christie Legal. I am a divorce and custody mediator and paralegal in Minnesota. I help folks handle divorce and custody cases with less conflict, less cost, and less time than the normal divorce or custody case process. Today, I'm with a group of professionals who also help folks who are divorcing because the legal stuff is not the only thing that happens when you're divorcing. There are many other aspects. And so, guys, if you could please introduce yourselves and let's go. Um, we'll start with Jay. We'll do all the J's and then Lynn.
Sweet. Hi, Christy. Hi, everybody here on Facebook Live. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jay Dworsky. I'm a financial advisor here in Minneapolis, and I enjoy working with, or processing, I should say, people who are contemplating divorce or going through it, and giving them the framework of how to navigate through that process. I'll give it to Jeff.
Hey, Christy, how are you? Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Scherber with Summit Mortgage. I am a mortgage banker, lender, and I've been doing this for over 25 years. And what I do is I help a lot of clients that are looking at the divorce process and try to help them guide them through the process, whether they should refinance, how to structure their deals, or whether they should buy now or maybe wait to buy. And I'll turn it over to Josh. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Josh Damberg. I am an estate planning and probate attorney, also an elder law attorney with the law firm of Henningson and Snoxell, which is located in Maple Grove, Minnesota. Primarily how I help divorcing individuals, or one of the divorcing individuals, I should correct, is I help them put in place certain documents, estate planning documents that would include wills, trusts, powers of attorney, and healthcare directives. So that is me and what I do.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Lin Chang with Edina Realty. I am a residential realtor and I help I help the divorcing couple determine equity in their home and how the home sale should go. Or I would also help them in situations of going to purchase their next property once the divorce is final.
All right. So we have a lot of ground to cover here. And so I'll start with the really boring legal stuff. And when you are divorcing, there are three main things that you're doing. So the first thing you're doing is dividing the assets. So that, of course, includes the house, which is usually the largest asset folks own. But that also includes retirement and investment accounts, vehicles, household goods, jewelry, everything that you folks purchased or accrued during the marriage. Now, there's marital assets and non-marital assets. Only marital assets are divided during the divorce. Non-marital assets are assets that you did not accrue or purchase during the marriage. And there is one exception to this rule, and that is homes, because you can have a marital interest in the non-marital home. And that's a whole another story we're not talking about now. And, so we take all of the assets that you folks have and we add up their values after subtracting like loans for the house and the cars and whatnot. And let's say the total value of assets you guys have is $300,000. So under Minnesota law, each of you would walk away with about $150,000 in assets because you're supposed to each walk away with about 50%. And when you're working together and you're divorcing jointly, you can reach other agreements, but we're going to go with what the law says right now. And so how we divide assets is I start out by saying, okay, who wants to walk away with what? And if somebody wants to keep the house, then I say, hey, have you talked to a mortgage banker? And if they haven't talked to a mortgage banker, then I strongly suggest they do talk to somebody like Jeff, because I've had multiple clients think they're going to take over the house and they don't earn nearly enough to qualify for the mortgage. And so that's really important to know while you're creating your divorce agreement, because we would have to rewrite the entire divorce agreement, the division of assets, if you can't qualify for the mortgage. And so, oh, and so we just start from what you guys want, and then we put each person what they want in their column, and then we see, you know, how unequal it is, and then we work towards equal or whatever you folks' goal is. And then we have the division of debts. Excuse me, allergies. And so the rule of law in Minnesota for dividing debts is based on ability to pay. And what that means in layperson terms is, you know, how much do you earn versus how much does the other person earn? So if somebody is earning no money, that means they have no ability to pay and they don't need to pay any of the debts. Even if they created all of the debt or most of the debt. So that's a really important thing to know. Ability to pay for dividing the debts. And then if you folks have kids, we have to figure out how you're going to share your children. We're going to have to figure out where their primary residence is going to be for schooling. You know, what division of parenting time are you going to have? So are you going to have joint physical custody, which means that the kids are with both parents about 50% of the time? Or are you going to have sole physical custody, which is actually a misnomer because neither parent solely or only has physical custody rights. So that's a terrible term. But what it means is that one parent has more parenting time than the other parent. And so there are lots of ways to do both joint physical custody and sole physical custody. We look at perhaps you guys have already been separated for a year or maybe even more, and you already have a custody agreement. And if that's working, you know, that's what we'll stick with. If you're still living together, we'll talk about work schedules. You know, if one person goes out of town frequently for business or social, and we'll just see what's going to work. Definitely remember that when there are children involved, the judge cares about the children way more than the parents. So it's called the best interest of the children. So let's see what else. Oh, and then we'll talk about child support, whether there's going to be child support or not, because sometimes when there's joint physical custody and the kids are with each parent half the time, the parties are just like, hey, you know, why do we need to have child support? And so then there's also legal custody, and that is who has a legal right to make decisions about the children's medical, dental, and mental health care, education, and religion. 90+% of the time, it is joint legal custody. A parent has to really, really mess up to not have legal custody of their children. And some other things that we'll handle is if one of the parties hasn't been working, spousal maintenance might come into play. And then we're also going to talk about, you know, how are you guys going to file for taxes this year? And if you haven't filed last year's yet, we're going to talk about how you're going to handle if you folks owe any money for taxes last year. And all sorts of really super fun stuff like that. Yeah, definitely the favorite part of my favorite part of the job. Not, but it has to be done because we want you to have a solid divorce agreement so that later on, you know, you're not having a bunch of bickering and not knowing what to do about things. So that is the boring legal stuff. So let's move on to talking about houses, most likely your largest asset. So Lynn, could you please talk to us about if folks need to first, you know, sell their house because, you know, they realize that neither of them can afford the house alone, or they just want to move far away or something. And then if they are going to buy a new house as well. Thanks much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Christie, for that. So when it comes to selling the property and, ensuring that both parties are agreeable to, the process, we usually like to meet with both people in one setting. There's some unique circumstances where we do have to do things individually, but the main message is it needs to be consistent. Needs to be organized, and we need to be compassionate of the entire situation. We know it's delicate, and so I'm here to be that advisor and that consultant to ensure that you guys have access to the appropriate information, mostly sharing market knowledge and comparable data to ensure that you're aware of what your value is within your home, and then understanding what you currently owe for debts on that property, and ultimately coming to a net proceeds where we know, hey, here's the equity that could potentially be split based off of the divorce decree and everything that's agreed upon in those proceedings. And so, that is a very streamlined process for a group like us. We work with sellers that are going through divorce very often. And so we're very good about communicating with all parties. And we want to be a resource for you. We want to make sure that we are connecting you to every professional that is needed within the transaction. So we're very good about networking and making the process very efficient for you, especially being that your mind might be on a lot of different things. So we want to, give you that access, give you the details that are needed, and come up with a marketing plan that'll help us sell your home in a timely fashion and allow you to get that maximum proceeds that is going to help each party go their separate ways. So, once that process is completed and we get that successful result, we're able to determine, okay, well, how should we get out there in the market and pursue that next opportunity? In a lot of cases, I've been able to work with both parties. I'm good about keeping things confidential and just being a professional that'll allow them to achieve some of their new outcomes and goals so they can get moving on with their life. And what's very interesting about today's market is it's a seller's market, right? So it's a great opportunity to get proceeds on the sale of your home, but buying can be very competitive. So, having a strong financial situation, if we can get good proceeds from the sale, will definitely put you in a really good position as a buyer. Right now, market inventory is less than 1 month, meaning that if no more homes hit the market today and sales continued at their current pace, all homes would be sold in less than a month. And so, there's, tens of 20s of buyers for every house. It's not uncommon to hear having 100 showings, especially on listings that we've held ourselves, and then hearing about offers going well above the asking price. In some cases, 10, 20, 30, 40, 60,000 over. I mean, you're kind of hearing a lot of different, information and craziness on how the market is just so bananas, but it's very good to have a real estate professional on your side to help you understand, okay, which properties are going to be, within the zone that you're looking for, within the area you're looking for. And we have a lot of different strategies on how we can create success for you to differentiate yourself from all of the other buyers that are offering on these properties. So I could talk all day, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Great, thanks. And, and thanks for talking about how crazy the market is right now, because that, if you're planning on divorcing and there's a house involved and you're not going to be keeping it, you need to talk to a real estate agent like Lynn just as soon as possible. And the other part of housing is being able to afford that house. And so, Jeff, please talk to us about people refinancing the mortgage and keeping the house or getting a mortgage for another house. Thanks.
Okay. Well, typically what I do, I try to meet with the client, do a consultation, and try to analyze what your long-term goals are. So we'll try to, establish if you're planning, if you'd like to move or maybe rent for a while. So what we do is we qualify you based on your income. In some cases, you may not, may be a spouse that may not qualify for the home, but they may have an option. People say, hey, I really want to stay in the home. Well, maybe you get a cosigner. Maybe your parents can cosign. Maybe a friend can cosign, brother, sister, or whatever. So you can at least stay in that home. If you are looking at refinancing and paying off the other spouse, then basically I do is analyze the numbers, figure out what needs to be paid off. And then we try to put some numbers together and say, okay, here's what your home is worth today based on an appraised value. And then if you pay your X amount, your spouse X amount, then we'll do a cash out. And then we put the property in your name, and then half of the proceeds go to you, and then half that proceeds go to your spouse. Now, the biggest question today with a lot of people are, because I ran into some that are divorcing, is, hey, should I wait now or should I, buy something now? And nobody, there is no right or wrong answer, but I can tell you right now, with the appreciation, the way things are going, you're looking at about an 8 to 10% appreciation. So let's just say if you looked at a townhome for about $250, you purchased today and rates are at still a good rate, around 3.25, 3.5. Okay. Depending on paying points or not, your payment, you'd be probably looking at just principal and interest of about $1,088. Now let's assume you wait a year, which could happen, and then rates go up, and rates will go up. There's a lot of signs of inflation right now, and eventually what's going to happen is the Fed's going to have to raise rates to slow down the economy. But let's say if the rates go up just a half of a point, which isn't a lot, but then that property that you were looking at purchasing for $250 is now $275. Okay, your payment jumps up, almost $200 a month, which is quite a bit. When you take a look at the scheme of things, because $200 a month, it's an extra $2,400 a year that you really didn't plan on. So, and also every situation, what I like to do is really meet with every client and just sit down and say, okay, where do you want to be? What's your long-term goals? Where do you want to be financially? In some cases, it may be better off renting. Let's pull out the 50 grand and that you have in equity, and let's pay off some credit card debt. Let's pay off a car. What I try to do is get them in, because it is a stressful time during the divorce, and you're used to having two incomes. Now you're going down to one, your own income, and you're not used to it. So let's try to evaluate where everything is at, what assets you have coming in, what you're going to deal with. And I try to get a lot of people into a situation where they're debt free, because then they're not stressed. You're not leaving the divorce and sure, you got some equity, but now you still have the car payment, you got 18 grand in credit card debt, student loans, and everything else. And it just puts a lot of stress. So by eliminating a lot of the debt, it takes a lot of the stress off of both parties. And what I noticed, that seems to really help each individual out. And then as far as also what I do is I counsel, like with Lynn, just to try to get an estimated value, because then we can get an idea whether it makes sense to refinance or sell the home. And then I have Lynn come out and do an evaluation if you're looking to sell. So there are a number of options. And really what it is really, asking a lot of questions and trying to see what your long-term goals are, because also if you're looking at moving in a year, well, then it probably doesn't make sense to buy a home. I've got one now where she says, hey, I'm going to buy down in Texas. I said, well, there's no sense in buying a home now and then paying all the closing costs. And then, the property may or may go up in value or may not. And then all of a sudden, by the time you pay the commission, everything else, you're taking a loss, which made sense to her, but she was, thought she really wanted to buy. But after I disclosed, this is where you're going to be at. Here's where you're going to be at a year from today. Best case, worst case scenario. She said, Jeff, she goes, I think you're right. I should just rent. Just take the money now. I said, now is a phenomenal time to sell. Let's get out, because it's a seller's market. Keep that money. And if you're going down to Texas, it's just wait a year. So again, really what I try to do is really, and again, in many cases, I will also counsel both individuals, and I keep everything confidential, so I don't tell the other individual what's going on. And I just try to see, what's going to benefit both parties. So in essence, that's sort of my job, and that's what I enjoy doing for my clients. Thanks.
Awesome, Jeff. Could you tell us just a little bit about how long you have to have had a child support or a spousal maintenance payment before you can count it as income?
Right. Yeah, basically what it is, it's 3 months on FHA and 6 months on conventional. So, and that it sort of puts you in a tough position because you really can't use that income for 3 months. And all of a sudden you sell your home, and then all of a sudden now you have to, move out, but you can't use the income, and now you can't buy for 3 months. Okay. So I've done in many cases is try to get some type of support that is paid to them, even if it's a small amount up front, prior to all this, because then we don't have to wait the 3 to 6 months. And I can use that dollar amount. So let's say, even if it's $100 and you start the process 6 months before you actually get divorced, and then all of a sudden it increases, I can use that increased amount. I don't have to use that $100, but at least I can show that there was consistent support that has been paid, for the last 6 months and consistently.
Oh, okay. That is a news to me that you could have a smaller payment in the beginning,
Right.
but then use the larger payment to qualify
Right.
for the mortgage. That's good to know.
Right.
Thanks.
Mhm.
And Jay, could you please tell us how you help people when they are in the divorce process?
Well, I would call myself the quarterback of the team. First of all, we're going to need to build a financial blueprint, and that's really the roadmap that they can see right in front of them. You would imagine, you're living with a partner for a substantial amount of time and everything's together. I think that probably the scariest part is framing it out. What is that going to look like when half or 3/4, or maybe it's just some of the amount of money coming into the household is gone? And how are they going to deal with that? I mean, and the mind just goes in all sorts of directions. So that would be someone that's contemplating a divorce. And so, in Minnesota and here in the United States, a lot of the divorces are very, people are upfront with it. Hey, we're thinking about splitting. I've actually had those conversations, and they were pleasant. I've also had them where the spouse is really kind of like, hey, I just thought about this, and I do not want this getting out at all whatsoever. And that's a very, as Lynn said, that's sensitive stuff, right? So everything, I'm a fiduciary. I cannot talk, even if I have both of them as clients, they're not going to find out. So the blueprint is really the first part. And then we get into, what is that going to look like? What's the optics? How are they going to deal with that kind of big change in their lives? And finally, how are they going to reach the end when they're going to retire if they do split up? And that's probably the biggest fear of most of the spouses, that they're not making as much as the other. And how are they going to do that, even though they might be miserable in the marriage? That's how I probably help them most, is that I really am good at framing things out and talking to them in a calm way so they can make a decision. I'll leave it at that, and I'll pass the baton over to Josh. But you can lead, Christie.
So those are the things that we help you with during the divorce process. You've got the financial and the legal. And so then after the divorce process, there's still things that need to be done, because we have to implement the agreements or orders that were handed down by the judge during the divorce. And then we also have to replan certain parts of our life. And one of those parts that we need to replan is our estate. And because we don't want necessarily our ex-spouse to be in control of our life anymore. So Josh, please tell us about that.
Sure. Thank you for the intro and the lead in there. And I'll kind of address it in a little bit of a flowing pattern. When you decide to get divorced, a few things happen in the estate planning world. And an estate plan, as I kind of said in my intro, typically encompasses two varying pieces. The first portion is what I refer to as your testamentary documents. So those are things like wills and trusts that control your assets when you're gone. The secondary thing that comes into play is your incapacity documents, and that's the other part of an estate plan. And that's where you don't pass away, but you become incapacitated and you need somebody to play a role for you. And so that is primarily a power of attorney and a healthcare directive. These two groups of documents are impacted differently by divorce. So when you initiate a divorce, your incapacity documents, your healthcare directive, your power of attorney, when you start that process, those kind of fall to the wayside. Your, still spouse, but hopefully or soon to be ex-spouse doesn't retain the ability to say, pull the plug if you have a healthcare event. That would obviously be bad or really poor policy, right? You don't want that person making that decision. But so they lose those powers under your healthcare directive and power of attorney. The law basically says they're deemed to be revoked as soon as the proceedings are initiated. On the other side of the spectrum, those testamentary documents, your wills, your trusts, the law doesn't have the same teeth, if you will. It still says, hey, you need to revisit these intentionally. You need to come back to these documents and redo them. Take that ex-spouse or that separated spouse out of the picture. So testamentary documents don't automatically do anything. There's a special law out there called the elective share even. So if you're proceeding through the process and you don't finalize it, you don't get that court stamped document or the order, and one of you passes away, well, that surviving still spouse can raise their hand in a probate court and say, based upon our length of marriage, there's actually a percentage based upon the length of marriage, I'm entitled to X or Y. So again, there's varying really important timing or certain documents as you walk through that process. To fully switch gears, once the process is over, the divorce is finalized, where I come into play is I can work with one spouse or the other in that situation. So I have certain ethical obligations that also matter upon the timeline. If you come to me as a married couple and start your estate plan, I can work with both of you under what's called a joint representation agreement. It means, hey, we're open, we're honest, we're basically talking about all of the same things together, and Josh, the attorney, can't keep secrets from anybody. If you start the divorce process, Josh, the attorney that can't keep secrets from anybody, doesn't get to pick or choose his favorite client. I actually have to step away and say, I have, very detailed knowledge about both of you. And so you actually both need to go seek individual counsel if you want to change your estate plans. So go find basically another estate planning attorney. If one or both of those people didn't work with me before the divorce and they come to me, at that time I can help them update and change their estate plan. So again, varying ethical considerations for someone in my shoes. But the idea is post-divorce, I always ask to see the divorce decree. I read through that and make sure there aren't any specific things. Sometimes divorces, as you may be aware, require life insurance to be held until a child becomes an adult. I have to look through that and say, okay, I can't advise you legally to update or change those beneficiary designations or to let go of that policy. But what I can start doing then is saying, okay, let's get your estate plan updated to indicate where do you want your assets to go? Who do you want your executor or personal representative to be with this ex-spouse no longer being involved? And if this ex-spouse predeceases you, so they're gone, and you die also while you have minor children, who do you want the guardians of those children to be? So Christie kind of touched on this as well a little bit, but I can't tell you with 100% certainty in your will, if you die and you say, I want my parents to be the guardians, but your ex-spouse is still living, that ex-spouse, unless their parental rights are terminated, will always be number one in the pecking order as to who gets physical custody of those kids. If they're gone, then potentially your will can control that. But so those are all the conversations I have basically pre, during, and post divorce as I straddle the lines and how I can or can't be involved in that process. So I know I kind of went long-winded here and kind of touched on both sides, but that's really my role in kind of a holistic approach.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, that's a very good point that you can't put in your will. I don't want that blurbity blurb word ex-husband or ex-wife of mine to have custody of the kids if I were to pass. Very important to know because that is a common misconception. So Jay, you also help folks after the divorce, and please tell us how you help people after the divorce.
Well, that would be the divorce decree, right, Christie? Just follow it to the letter. Splitting up assets, and the hand-holding continues. What I like to do, and I think I talked about this our last live, is I'll queue up the call while they're at work, because you know, their lives have changed probably a lot. Maybe they're working more. If they have children, you know, the time allotted to deal with these issues, I mean, they've probably lost a lot of steam along the way. So if I can make that a lot easier, and that would be, I probably make a call to Fidelity probably once a month or more for assets to go into their own IRAs. It's a large institution. And it takes them about 5 minutes to change that out. The checks go to their houses, and then they can go into their own personal IRA, and they're on their way. That's one thing. And then, you know, you got to update their life insurance. Like you said, you can't just dump a life insurance policy because that's part of the divorce decree. They may want to add a new one, change beneficiaries as to what the divorce decree says. Some of those life policies are term insurance. Some of them are permanent whole life or variable universal life. And quite frankly, a lot of people don't understand what they bought or what their spouse bought. There's a lot of difference between life insurance policies. And that could be like a couple of meetings and just patience of teaching them what did they buy, and do you want to keep it? Is it the right thing for you to pay that premium? And how is that going to take you to your eventual retirement? Does it work? And there's just a lot of education, and it's slow going, and I'll go as fast or as slow as they want. Probably good to stop at that point.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay.
You're welcome.
Otherwise, you could go on forever, right?
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Okay. And Jeff, how do you help people after divorce so far as, you know, maybe they weren't able to, you know, get the mortgage for keeping the marital homestead or buying another house? But how can you help them be able to get a mortgage in the future?
Well, in a lot of cases, what I do, it's a consultation where basically we'll sit down and analyze. Because in some cases, what happens during the divorce, maybe it's a divorce that's been dragging on for 6 months, and there's one spouse that decides not to make some of the payments on a credit card. Well, obviously the credit got destroyed. So in that situation, what I'll do is basically look at their situation and do what's called like a credit rescore analysis, and let them know that, hey, right now your FICO score is at like a 610. You know, to go FHA, we need to be at least a 620. To get a decent rate on a conventional, you need to be about a 700. And I can run an analysis and say, okay, here's your situation. Based on where you're at today, we need to make payments going forward. Do not miss any payments. Maybe pay this collection off or pay that collection off. Pay a credit card down to, you know, in some cases, if you got a $2,000 limit and that's maxed out, you pay it down to like $200 or $400. That'll get your FICO score up there. So I can run an analysis for the client and just let them know that, hey, this is what we can do. And it's what it is. It's called the Path to Buy program. So basically, I don't care if you're ready to purchase now or if it's going to be 6 months or a year, but what it's best to sit down and analyze your situation today, because then if you know that there's issues we need to deal with, let's deal with them now. And then basically, if you listen to what I tell you to do, pay the debts down and maybe get rid of this or that. We'll do a rescore for you, get your credit up, and then basically in another year or maybe it's 6 months, you're ready to buy. So in essence, what I do is analyze everything and just make sure that you're on the right track to purchase down the road, if now is not the time. That's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
And so does anyone else have anything that they would like to add? I'm not seeing any questions on the Facebook Live post. Do you guys have any parting thoughts or thoughts that you forgot when you were speaking earlier?
I think it's just really good to put this into perspective. Why are we doing this? Why are we on Facebook Live talking about divorce? And who are we? We're a group of professionals that really understand our space, and we came together because we think we can be a good advisory, of good help. And we do it in a way that we pass off our expertise to each other, and we think we've covered, quite a bit of areas that you'll need. And we've got our fearless leader in Christie, who will pass you off, in ways that you can. And you don't have to use all of us, or you can use some of us, but at the end of the day, you guys get to choose. You can use our resources. So we really appreciate you listening, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks for stating why we do this. And we all offer a free or no cost initial consultation because we want to give you some tools, some knowledge for making decisions, because knowledge is power. And we want you to be in a powerful position to make good decisions that future you is going to thank you for making. That's one of my friends who's a life coach, Ben Millard, always talks about, make future you proud. So, so everybody here in Minnesota who is watching us, make future you proud and get all the knowledge that you want about divorcing and separating. And I hope you have a great rest of this kind of dreary, kind of coldish Minnesota day. But warmer days are coming. Thanks very much.